Sorry to jump around a little, but this is the journalist or politician's question, really. But just going back to the health issue here, this classification of global greenhouse gas emissions, is it possible? I mean, to be honest, I had no idea this was an issue. You know, I follow it reasonably closely, not U.S. politics, but the issue. So it was quite a. I mean, it's my ignorance, but I thought, oh, this is very interesting. Can you put it in some sort of context? Can you? To me, as you explain it, it looks incredibly important. You know, how important is it? Sorry, in terms of the climate change negotiations or the U.S. position, and internally, U.S. views and attitudes and policy on climate?
Well, it is very important, and to have the official reaffirmation of the science, especially now when there's this flub-dub about the emails, is very important. To have the statement that this is not just a change in physical systems in the planet, but this is a threat to people's health and their well-being, is a way of making it concrete for the American people. To connect the asthma that they suffer when the smog is made more intense by the heat that's caused by global warming. To connect the horrible things that happened in the Gulf Coast in Hurricane Katrina to the fact that the heat from global warming is making the hurricanes more intense. To connect heat death in episodes like we had in Chicago some years ago, and we have every summer to some lesser degree. To connect that to global warming and to carbon dioxide emissions, that helps bring home to people that this affects their personal health and well-being in the here and now, and not just distant parts of the globe or something that will happen in the lifetime of their grandchildren. So that all helps. In another sense, this was not a surprise, because in the U.S., the proposal was made last spring, and everyone knows, everyone involved, everyone in Congress, everyone in the industry, everyone in the environmental community knew this was coming. And so sometimes, you know, when when a company's earnings are reported and they are within expectations, the stock price doesn't change. So I don't think anything changed yesterday in the Congress in terms of the estimation of what's going to happen under the Clean Air Act, and in terms of their intent to go forward with legislation. They sort of internalized it already. But for you over here, for people outside the country, it's something of a pleasant surprise.
I've got an Obama question, unless you want to come in. There has to be an Obama question. We're all tied to our leaders for years. You know, we had Margaret Thatcher, and people asked me about my relationship to Margaret Thatcher, or are we all like her or something. So I'm afraid I've got to put an Obama question here, because he is amazingly part of these negotiations long before he arrives. He's going to come next week. He's changed the date of arrival. He can make an inspirational speech. We know, we've seen how good he is at that. But you want to do a little, I think everyone's expecting a little more than that. On the other hand, he has domestic political constraints. What can he say? What can he do? Does he have much leeway, given his own domestic political problems and balancing act? What, can he come and say something other than something inspirational?
Well, I think what's more important is what the high-level Sherpas, as we call them, the people who prepare these summit meetings, what they do between now and the time the leaders arrive. And they need to find the formula that balances the interests here to get what the Danes have been calling the politically binding commitments out of countries, agreement. The United States has already put a serious proposal on the table. And I think what he can say, in part, is my ability to complete this, to deliver it at home, is dependent on being able to show that the other major emitting countries are doing serious things. The encouraging thing is, of course, the Chinese, the Indians, the Koreans, the South Africans, and Brazil. I'm going to miss some of the major announcements which have been made in the last few weeks or even the last couple of days. And there is this strong sense that not just the developed countries, but also developing countries are making real efforts and bringing things of real significance to the table. Who could have imagined a year ago that China and India would have carbon intensity numbers of any kind? And now, though, the task is, can we find the formula for sort of writing them down and for expressing the mutual commitments that are being made? I will do this if you will do that. I will do this if you provide that financing. Can we find that formula? It would be a great shame if that can't be found with 100+ leaders here. It would be a great failure for them all, not just for my president. But I do think that the U.S. team is intent on finding that formula, and but it needs they need the help and cooperation of the leaders from other countries too. It's not just down to the U.S. It's we have some very serious proposals from our government, and and we also have needs in order to be able to deliver the Congress and deliver the American public to know that everybody's doing their part. Not the same part, but everybody's doing their part.
Can I pin you down just a little bit on that point? Because actually, I'll take the opportunity to remind people that this is an interactive session. All our sessions are interactive. We're live here today, right now. Unless you happen to be watching this later when we're going to show it on a loop recorded, but you'll know that because there will be text underneath the screen telling you that. However, you can put your questions and comments in. At this point, we only have about 3 or 4 minutes left in today's session, but be with us again tomorrow, and you can certainly put your questions and comments in at oneclimate.net. I say all this because we have a comment on the site that actually gets right to what you were just saying. The comment is this: what does China's recent carbon intensity announcement mean? Is it a step forward, or is it too weak?
Well, I think it's a step forward in that it exists. I would say again, China, a year ago, you would never have imagined that they would make a carbon intensity commitment. I think there's a sense that they've been careful about what they put forward for international, as an international commitment. Could they do more? We think they could do more. Could the U.S. do more? We think they could do more. And whether that decision is taken next week or in a couple of years, there's some choices here. In other words, let's at least harvest what countries have put on the table now and create a process where they do what they say and report on what they say and evaluate what they say mutually. And then it's possible for the countries to step up. For example, I mentioned that there's this proposal for the U.S. legislation to empower the president to raise our target to as much as 20% reduction for 2020 if the president certifies that other countries have made the appropriate commitments and are carrying them out. That's, in a sense, that's a very positive basis for continuing the interaction and for moving up the ladder of commitments together.
I have a sense, actually, that in these negotiations in Poznan and before, the US was so clearly and easily labeled the bad guy by a lot of countries that didn't want to do very much, and now it's not so easy, and in fact they're having to come up with declare their real interests, I think.
So for the last 8 years before this administration, it was very easy for others to point their fingers at the United States or hide behind the skirts of the United States. But now the U.S. is ready to move to this extent at least, and it puts the question to other countries, what will you do, what can you do? I think there's some difficult negotiating, some of it to be completed by the end of next week, and some of it will have to be dealt with later when they try to reduce this to the legal language of a treaty agreement. But huge progress has been made. More countries have made more commitments to do things than certainly a year ago, and more than I would have expected. And it's time to harvest that and not get hung up.
Okay, David Doniger of the Natural Resources Defense Council. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. It's really interesting, and it's interesting how so often events that affect the negotiations happen way outside them. something like this, the greenhouse gas decision in the US has an impact. It ripples around the conference. It's quite intriguing how that happens. And indeed with, say, the British and French leaders urging bigger cuts than were already made by the European Union. Not said here, but clearly important. So thank you very, very much for coming in.